Today, we're focusing on the real estate sector and how technology is modernizing the way property transactions are handled.
When you first start out as the role as a founder, you're doing pretty much every job, which is one of the most exciting things about being an entrepreneur is you have this great sense of impact because you're the engineer, you're the talking to investors on a day-to-day basis, you're doing design work for your product.
Because the real estate industry is constantly evolving and technology is playing an increasingly important role in that transformation. Robert, how do you see the real estate industry evolving over the next 5 years, and what role will tech play in shaping that evolution?
There's a lot of companies that are focusing more on the client experience for the whole journey.
If you are looking to disrupt a traditional industry, please remember that identifying inefficiencies and creating user-centric solutions can lead to significant success. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the CanadianSME Small Business Podcast. This is your host, Maheen, and this is where we are to explore the entrepreneurial journeys and innovative solutions that are transforming Canadian industries. Today, we're focusing on the real estate sector and how technology is modernizing the way property transactions are handled. Because recent trends, they highlight the increasing demand for digital solutions in traditionally slow-moving industries and the need for greater transparency and efficiency in complex transactions. And this discussion will provide valuable insights for entrepreneurs and businesses that are looking to disrupt established markets. Joining us today is Robert Saunders, the co-founder and CEO of Ownright, a Toronto-based legal tech and PropTech startup. With a vision to simplify real estate transactions, Robert is leading the charge in bringing innovation to the legal side of property ownership. And today we'll discuss scaling a PropTech startup in Canada, bringing innovation to the real estate industry, and navigating a startup rebrand and raising capital. So without a further ado, let's welcome our guest, Robert. Robert, we're very pleased to have you on the show today. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. First of all, Maheen, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to be on the podcast and excited to dive in.
Absolutely. We're very looking forward to as well. I've shared quite a couple cues in my intro, but we'd love to understand, scaling, how to scale a prop tech startup in Canada. Now, Robert, Ownright is changing how real estate transactions are handled. So let's start by exploring your journey of scaling that company. Now, scaling a startup is never easy. Please tell us what were some of the key lessons that you learned from growing Ownright and from 3 founders to 19 team members while quadrupling the transaction volume annually.
Totally, I'd love to. So as you say, scaling a startup is definitely not easy. We have been on this mission for a couple years now, 2 years, and early on, it was myself, Joel, and Ben, who just the 3 co-founders. And I think as we've grown, we've raised some capital. With that capital, we've been able to grow our team. We've been able to build product, and we've got a lot of traction in the market. And through that process, we've obviously learned a lot. I think in terms of some of the biggest lessons that we're kind of facing is as you grow your team, what becomes really important is building out systems.
Mhm.
So whether that be systems to be able to onboard more people onto your team, um, as well as even just like operational. I think when you first start out as the role as a founder, you're doing pretty much every job, which is one of the most exciting things about being an entrepreneur is you have this great sense of impact because you're the engineer, you're the talking to investors on a day-to-day basis, you're doing design work for your product, you're talking to real estate brokerages in our case, real estate agents to do direct sales. Suddenly it becomes not possible for you to do all of those roles, and you need people to help you.
Mhm.
And without really solid processes and systems, that's not possible.
Right.
So I would say, like getting really clear on what you're really good at and uniquely like your superpower has been something that, myself and my co-founders have been thinking a lot about. And then figuring out, what roles make the most sense for us to hire for. and so that we can create the most amount of leverage for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Once we identify that, I think then it's about creating the system and building trust within that team. And one thing that's really important is as you grow your team, culture becomes a really important thing. Like, you have to, in the early days, it's you and a couple of your first employees, and you have this really great culture and vibe. And as you start to bring on more and more people, that culture can start to drift, and you really have to be intentional with how you spend time together, and get clear on things like your company values. So just recently, we reassessed what our values were as a company, because some of those things that you used to just live, become a little bit harder to live if they're not written out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of kind of like just one system, which is just like getting very clear on those things so that you can propagate them and create leverage for yourself. So I think, to answer your question, uh, one of the biggest lessons has just been creating systems, and making sure those systems are durable and constantly reassessing them.
That's a very impressive growth trajectory, and it's clear that strategic scaling and team building, they're very crucial. And I think that kind of growth story is very inspiring. Now, building on the theme of innovation, Robert, let's discuss why you identified real estate law as an area ripe for disruption. Because bringing innovation to real estate law involves more than just the new ideas. It's all about evolving existing practices to meet the modern needs. So tell us, why did you see real estate law as an area of interest for disruption, and what strategies have you employed to bring innovation to this traditionally slow moving industry?
Totally. So, I'm not a real estate lawyer, so real estate law was not something I knew much about before starting Ownright. Um, I fell into the industry because of a personal experience that I had when I purchased my first property.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was looking for my first property. I worked with a real estate agent, and I found a condo in Toronto. So I've grown up in Toronto my whole life. I was really excited about this first opportunity to buy a place. And when I was going through that process, I went through the offer process. The seller agreed to the terms, and I was like, okay, great. And I said to my real estate agent, where do I send the money? How do I get the keys? What's next? And he looked at me and said, well, you need a real estate lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
I had never used a lawyer for anything in my life, and I didn't even know what a real estate lawyer did.
Mm-hmm.
And I ultimately used the real estate lawyer that was recommended to me by my agent.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through that process where I saw that the process did not meet my expectations as a
Right.
consumer. So one thing about me is I'm a super techie type of person, and any sort of digital product is what I love to use. So your Ubers for ordering food, even just like scheduling my haircuts, all that. I'm the first to use a digital product. And my experience with my real estate lawyer was I had to go into the lawyer's office to sign the documents. Everything was happening through email. I had to go to drop off the check. I had to go to pick up the keys. And it felt like this really kind of rigid process that was still operating in a very archaic way.
Right.
And the other thing about it was it cost a lot of money. And I also didn't feel very well supported because being a first time home buyer, I didn't know much.
Mm-hmm.
So I was being asked questions about things like, what's your insurance binder? And I didn't know what an insurance binder was. And I didn't feel well supported if I had questions.
Right.
And so it was that experience that sparked my interest in the problem space. Prior to starting on Reddit, I worked at Shopify for about 4 years as a software engineer there.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that was also really interesting to me was the role that the real estate lawyer plays is a very critical role.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones in Canada who are the only people who can actually transfer title from one person to another. And so I got really interested about just like, it's this really important role in the process of a real estate transaction, but it's not being solved in the greatest way.
Mm-hmm.
And so quickly after that, I went to go and interview a bunch of different home buyers and home sellers to better understand if my experience with my real estate lawyer matched what they had. And what they quickly told me was they also didn't have a great experience.
Right.
And so that was the launching kind of, the thing that got me into the industry. Um, and since then, we've been able to build a digital product where home buyers and home sellers can confidently close on their property closing all through our digital product. So instead of going into the lawyer's office to sign the documents, instead of everything happening through email, you have a dashboard where you can see exactly where your property closing is in the process.
Mm-hmm.
You can complete tasks for the things that we need you to do. So things like verifying your identity, telling us how you're going to be financing the property, sharing your insurance details with us. All of that happens through the platform,
Mm-hmm.
all the way through to your closing, where you meet your lawyer virtually to sign the documents. And then on closing, you actually get a real time tracker to see exactly how things are going. And then eventually, you get your keys shown to you in your dashboard and have the access to the lockbox combination. And so, the combination of our digital product, but also our client success team, which is a team of in-house lawyers as well as client success managers, that combination makes for a much more pleasant experience for people. I think a real estate transaction is often one of the biggest financial investments of somebody's life, and we really believe that people shouldn't be stressing and have all this anxiety around it. They should be celebrating, and it should be a really joyous occasion for them. And with our process, because of the transparency, because of our cost, we're also significantly cheaper than a traditional real estate lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
and the support from our real humans on the team leads to just a much better experience for people that it is also a lot more efficient for people. So in terms of your time, you're saving a lot of it using Ownright.
That is a very insightful observation and great motivation and inspiration behind the story that you shared, Robert. And you're right. Many traditional industries they are in need of modernization, and I think that kind of disruptive thinking is very, very valuable. Listeners, if you are looking to disrupt a traditional industry, please remember that identifying inefficiencies and creating user-centric solutions can lead to significant success. Now let's get back to our conversation with Robert and explore Ownright's rebrand and fundraising journey. Now let's delve into Ownright's recent rebrand and the challenges and opportunities involved in that process, because rebranding is a critical step in any company's growth, and it's especially true when transitioning from one identity to another. So Ownright recently, went through a rebrand from Doormat, and we'd love to understand what drove that change, Robert, and what key lessons did you learn from that rebrand process?
Totally. So answering the first part of that question, which is what drove the change, Doormat was a great place to start. The origin of where Doormat, the name, came from was I was sitting in my condo that I purchased, and I was looking around for things in the condo that we could name this project that I was working on at the time. And I saw my doormat, and I was like, oh, that is a cool object in my house. And it was also kind of a transitionary object. It's the
Mhm.
first thing you see when you walk into a house. And there was the original idea where, when someone closed on their property, we would give them a doormat upon completion of their closing.
Mhm.
I think as we started to mature as a business, one of the things that became really clear to us was, um, you know, we looked at kind of what um, the modern homeowner wants,
Mhm.
and doormat didn't really match with what that identity and mission that we were driving towards was.
Mhm.
It was really, I think doormat, as I mentioned, is at the front door, but really with Ownright, we want to be with you through the whole process.
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons. I think, because we're such an early stage company, if there's ever going to be a time where we would reassess the name of the company, it would be now. It becomes harder and harder to do as you
To
get
do later,
older.
yes.
Um, and so that was kind of, the motivation
Mhm.
of the change. In terms of lessons learned through the process, I think, we spent quite a while thinking about what our new name would be, and going back to what I just said, which is really understanding your mission, what you want to do, who your audience is, was where we started with the process. So we looked at what our identity currently conveyed to people by surveying a lot of people in the market. So asking them really good questions about, like, what does our brand currently mean to you, and comparing that against what do we want our brand to mean to these people.
Right.
And that gave us a really good signal in terms of the direction that we wanted to go with things. And then also from a high level business point of view, thinking about what is the longer term vision of the company, and can we find something that fits really well with that as well. I think, some lessons learned there is just really asking good questions early in the process before you get too deep. We also did work with an external agency to help us with the naming process, which was really helpful because it took a little bit of burden off of our team so that we could focus on all the other things going on in the startup, which there are plenty of. And so they were a great partner for us. And then when it came to the visual identity,
Mm-hmm.
We used it as an opportunity to build up our marketing muscle internally by hiring a great brand and marketing designer. And I think, like one of the big lessons for us there was the value of having someone in house who can execute on creative for you has been a real game changer for us. And I think, looking forward, it's really exciting because, I think our brand does really mean what we want it to be, and resonates a lot better with the audience. So.
Yeah, that's a very interesting transition, Robert. And rebranding, it can be complex, but essential step. But it is quite an essential step for growth. And I think that kind of brand evolution is very important sometimes. And that was a fascinating look into Ownright's rebrand and the lessons learned during the process. We're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. When we return, we'll dive into the challenging but rewarding world of raising capital for startups and how Robert successfully closed a 4.5 million seed round. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss it.
As a small business owner, you know that delivering on your promises on time, every time is key. And that means offering your customers the best delivery experience. That's why we at UPS are excited to introduce our new Saturday delivery service, available for both home delivery and to a UPS Access Point location, providing faster delivery exactly when and how your customers want it, without any extra costs. Our Saturday delivery service is just another way we're supporting you in growing your business and helping you gain that competitive edge.
Welcome back, everyone. Now let's get into the crucial topic of fundraising. Robert is going to share his insights on raising capital and offer advice to other Canadian founders that are navigating this challenging journey. Let's jump right back in. Ownright, it also recently secured significant funding. So let's kind of discuss your experience raising capital, because raising capital is a crucial step for startups, and understanding the challenges and the strategies involved is sometimes the key to the success. So please tell us, Robert, that you recently closed about 4.5 million seed round. What advice would you give to other Canadian founders who are in the process of raising capital?
Great question. So first thing I would say is raising capital is not for everyone, and you have to do what makes the most sense for you. Um, and I think, like, for us, what made the most sense was when we asked ourselves the questions around what do we want to do, um, which is also a very important thing to ask yourself, is like, if you're going to get all this money, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
You have to have a plan, and aligning that plan with kind of the investor expectations is a really important thing to do. But yeah, I think, through our journey, we've raised multiple rounds of funding. So early on in the process, we raised a friends and family round. Um, from there, we raised a pre-seed, and this recent raise of 4.5 million was our seed funding round.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those stages were different, but they all had their own purpose. And so with this most recent funding round, we're really excited to use it to fuel a lot more spend in terms of getting our brand and marketing out and sharing our mission with people, but as well as focusing on building out the foundations from an engineering and product point of view um, to scale our business. And I think one thing that was really important for us to be able to successfully close that funding round and build the relationships with the investors was being very clear on what we were going to do with it. In terms of some other advice, I think funding is not just money. it's relationships and advice, and choosing who you raise money from is a really important thing. So we've been very lucky to have a great set of investors who support us day in, day out, by connecting us to people in the industry. And so my advice to people who are looking to raise money is, don't just think about it as money, but think about it as true partners, because your investors will be with you on the journey for the life of the company. And sometimes they might be actually in the company longer than you will. So I think that's a really important thing, is just really carefully thinking about that. And the best way to kind of help you with that thought process is by really networking as much as possible to meet as many different people, so that you can really better understand like who is the best to support you.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a very valuable perspective, Robert. And fundraising, it can be a challenging but a rewarding process. And I think that kind of fundraising advice is very helpful for our audience. Now, let's take a broader look at the future of the real estate industry, because the real estate industry is constantly evolving and technology is playing an important role, an increasingly important role in that transformation. Robert, how do you see the real estate industry evolving over the next 5 years, and what role will tech play in shaping that evolution?
Totally. So the real estate market is, as you say, one of those industries that is maybe a little bit slower to evolve than some of the others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this might seem very obvious, but I think tech adoption is going to be huge over the next few years, more so than it has in the past. And with that tech adoption, I think one thing that's really obvious to me is there's a lot of companies that are focusing more on the client experience for the whole journey. So these are companies that are reassessing what the client experience looks like from end to end. And they want to own more and more of that process. And for us, as we think about it, we solve one critical piece of the homeownership journey. And I think with these new technology companies, the PropTech companies, there'll be more collaboration across PropTech companies that will lead to a overall better client experience for them,
Mm-hmm.
for end consumers, because the PropTech companies will be able to work together through integrations. So, for example, there might be a tech-enabled brokerage who has this really great experience to help you find and discover properties. There also might be this really great tech-enabled mortgage broker who's going to help you find the best mortgage. And those two companies might work together to make this one really great experience. And then you might have Ownright, who is specializing in making the best closing experience for people to go through, that we work with them as well. And I think what that will lead to is consolidation in the number of companies that consumers end up working with when they are on their real estate journey.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be really interesting to see that. And then I think the other really important thing, which is kind of related to tech, is the adoption of AI to help people better find the properties that they want, to make processes more efficient, so including the closing process, which overall will just lead to a much better experience for everyone. So the long story short of what I just said is just generally more tech adoption, which will lead to a much better experience for people, so they can just focus on the most important things in life, which is creating the memories in their new home, instead of being super stressed about that journey to find that home.
That's a very forward thinking vision, Robert. And you're right, technology has the potential to significantly transform the real estate experience. And I think that kind of industry outlook is very exciting. Now, to conclude, Robert, I mean, this has been such an enlightening conversation with you. Let's summarize the key insights for our listeners. What are the key takeaways that you'd like our listeners to remember about scaling a PropTech startup? And then final advice do you have for entrepreneurs and businesses that are looking to disrupt the established markets?
So in terms of key takeaways from what we talked about today, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned from scaling our business has been the importance of creating systems within your team and really focusing on the culture of your team and really prioritizing that, because culture drift is really can be a problem as you start to add more people into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of general advice I have to entrepreneurs, I would say start as soon as possible. One of my biggest regrets in my journey was I didn't make the transition from my full-time job into becoming an entrepreneur, because I thought it was too scary of a jump to make. And I wish I had done that sooner,
Mm-hmm.
because the amount of support that is available to you through things like funding, when you actually do make that change, when you actually do have an idea that you've somewhat validated and somewhat started to build, it's there for you, and don't be afraid to start. On top of that, I think, because our industry is a heavily regulated industry, and if there's entrepreneurs that are looking into have a big idea, but it's too scary because, the regulators aren't going to let you, or whatever it may be, my advice to them would be, don't let that scare you,
Mm-hmm.
and try to build trust with the regulators as early as possible. So for us, you know, the real estate lawyers in Ontario are regulated by the Law Society of Ontario, and very early on in our process, we worked with the Law Society of Ontario to make sure that everything that we were doing was okay, because non-lawyers can't own law firms. That was a regulatory barrier that we had to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And had I and my co-founders just stopped working on it, because 2 of the 3 co-founders weren't lawyers, I think, Ownright would not be where it is today, and the innovation that we're building as a team would not have happened, and it would have been very easy to not, continue. So I would just, general advice there is, don't be afraid to start and just keep going.
That is a very nice advice, golden advice, by the way. And you're right. I mean, things just go and fall into place when you're willing to take that risk and willing to leap into that. But thank you so much, Robert, for spending time with us and for sharing your expertise and your insights with us, and your practical advice and the entrepreneur journey that you shared with our audience is truly valuable, and we really appreciate the time that you took out to come here and share that with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great.
And that was an insightful conversation with Robert Saunders, the co-founder and CEO of Ownright, on scaling a PropTech startup, bringing innovation to the real estate industry, and navigating the challenges of building a business. His experience provides valuable guidance for entrepreneurs that are looking to disrupt established markets and really create positive change. Again, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. We really, really, really appreciate your continued support. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more expert insights and resources that can help your business thrive. You can visit our website, CanadianSME.ca, for valuable information and tools. A special thanks to our podcast partners, RBC, UPS, and Google, for their ongoing commitment to empowering small businesses in Canada. Until next time, please keep innovating and striving for success. We'll see you in the next episode.